Lisa, we are already live.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Africa's regulatory shifts and changes that matter. My name is Annalisa Samuels, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm the sales manager of Synot Games. And I am very privileged today to be hosting or moderating this webinar on behalf of the hosts. I am also very excited because we have a great list of panelists here, esteemed speakers, players in the industry that are very well recognized, very well experienced, and I hope that by the time we leave today, we leave with some takeaways that is going to change our perspective or help us understand Africa better and where we're going in the near future. I mean, change is the only real constant, right? So if we can manage that change and we can manage it positively in the space, I'm very, very certain that we can go places in our industry and actually quite much faster than we think we can. Before I begin, I just want to give you a little bit of an intro. We had a call yesterday and I was just so taken aback by all the information that came through. So I'm not quite sure whether we're going to get all the content in today or not, but if we don't, we're hoping to be able to continue this conversation in the future. So I just wanted to tell you that from the start because there's so much that comes through and so much information sharing that happens. And I've got quite a few questions that I'm going to ask. Okay, before we continue, I'd like to intro all the panelists. I've asked them to do their own introduction, but I'm going to hand you over to them one by one. We're going to start with the ladies first. Ms. Rachel Mijiga, can you start by telling us more about yourself, please?
Thank you very much, Rashi, and all the panelists and our viewers and listeners out there. My name is Rachel Mijiga. I'm the Director General for Malawi Gaming and Lotteries Authority, responsible for strategic direction of the industry, basically the gaming and lottery sector in Malawi, as well as growth of the industry and stakeholder management. I think the direction these days is ESG, so we come in to balance the interests of all the stakeholders and also making sure that we're looking after the players, the environment, as well as society. Thank you.
Before I go on, there seems to be a bit of a technical issue on the other side where people can't hear. So if we can just address that, thanks in the background, that will be appreciated. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Mr. B, I'd like to call him Mr. Bashir. Would you like to do your intro, please?
How are you doing? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Bashir Are, and I'm the CEO of Lagos State Lottery and Gaming Commission. And I also double as the chairman of the Federation of State Gaming Regulators of Nigeria, which comprises of 26 states out of the 36 states of the Federation. And I'm happy to be here to join you to see how we can move the industry forward on the continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. Thirdly, we have someone from India, a country very close to my heart. I love going to India. Mr. Sujit Lahiry. He's the CEO of Skilrock, and he's going to introduce himself now.
Thank you, Annalisa. So I'm Sujit Lahiry, and I am a technocrat. I am CEO of Skilrock Technologies. So I've spent 41 years in various technology roles, but last 21 years in lottery and gaming. So that's pretty close to my heart. We have a company which specializes in various solutions and also regulatory solutions for the gaming industry. So that's a very brief introduction about me.
Sorry, I guess sometimes you just have to keep it simple because if you have to really give the rundown about yourself, it's probably going to take hours. So thanks for that. We have Mr. Fortune Sekgaphane here in the house. Everyone, for those of you who know Fortune's been with in gambling for decades now, and he's been a pioneer in LPMs in South Africa. And I know him from when I was a little girl. So I'm very excited to speak to him today, or actually be part of this conversation with him. Fortune, can you tell us more about yourself before I just tell him everything?
Thank you, Annalisa. You just disclosed my age right there. My name is Fortune. The surname is Sekgaphane. I'm the director and lead consultant of Bojosi Consulting Solutions. I've been in the industry, as Annalisa said, for a number of years, well around 28 years now. Started as an inspector and back in the years in Mpumalanga, and then moved to the Northwest Province as the Chief Executive Officer. All in all, having spent around 15 years as a Chief Executive Officer regulating gambling in both Mpumalanga and the Northwest Province. I went into private sector analysis and tried my luck there and bent my fingers. I spent 4 years there, and I realized my passion is just to regulate gambling, and I decided to establish an organization, the company that I represent, to just do consulting and do consulting in Africa. That's my passion. My passion is to see Africa being well regulated, and that's what I do for a living. Thank you, Annalisa.
That was beautiful. And I think, this panel is so blessed because we have all the right hearts in place. I mean, if you look at Bashir and if you look at Ms. Mijiga and everyone together, you collectively hold so much passion and interest towards, regulating in Africa and building Africa. And that's amazing. Last but not least, I'd like to introduce a rising star, and that's what I like to call him, a rising star, Zuko Phandle, who's actually making some waves these days at all the conferences and, being very active in online, moving ahead with online betting in the Eastern Cape in South Africa. So Zuko, over to you. Before you start, let's keep it short, okay?
No. Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. I am Zuko Phandle, the Manager, Audit and Compliance in the Eastern Cape Gambling Board. Very much passionate about information security, data privacy, player protection, public protection. I've been in the industry for over about 16 years now, including having worked for the Western Cape Gambling Board. I'm also serving as a member of the technical working group for the SABS, that is South African Bureau of Standards, wherein we develop, review, update the technical standards for the gaming technologies. So this is me representing Eastern Cape Gambling Board. Thank you for having me.
Not just Eastern Cape, you're representing South Africa, Zuko. So
thank you.
Well done. The first question, we're going to move on to the first question because I know everybody's excited to get into the content. The first question that I have for this panel is, which regulatory reforms recently have had the most transformation impact on the gaming sector? And which markets are emerging as benchmarks in modernization? Also, considering comparatively to what's happening internationally, if we can just have your feedback on that and where you see everything going. So let's start with Ms. Rachel, ladies first, and then we can progress to the rest of the panelists. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rashi. I'll give you a case point of Malawi, and then we'll relate the same to the global landscape. So Malawi, 2022 post-COVID, we had arcade laws. We're going back to 1996. Then we're looking at the operators coming on the scene with games like Aviator. We had to repeal the old act to come up with the new one so that we can also allow ourselves to incorporate internet gaming. Because you're looking at the phone now, post-COVID, everyone was busy on the phone. Everything moved to the phone, including meetings, banking, and everything also is, as the games, they've moved the phone. The beauty of the phone, it's so versatile. So we had to repeal the old act, the 1996 one, come up with the new one, which we passed and was assented to in October 2022. That allowed us to offer licenses to operators to incorporate internet gaming and even for them to digitize as well. That also meant we also had to digitize as a regulator because we needed to be at par with the operators to understand what they're offering and what they are also doing. And that also had to give us a confidence to say, when it comes to revenue assurance component, because this money, remember, belongs to the public. So we also digitized, we came up with the central monitoring system to look at what the operators are doing. The first bit was to look at the revenue, and then the second bit was to look at player accounts. As a regulator, we need to log into the system and say, what are the accounts behaving like? What are the limits? Are we adhering to limits? Remember, we all got a responsibility, whether a regulator or an operator, to be responsible for these same players. Because if you exhaust everything else, we will not have a market come tomorrow. So that responsibility rests with all of us. And that meant also growth, because we're looking at the offering digital products. Borrowing from the telecoms, looking at the numbers, it meant growth also coming into the market to both government, ourselves as the regulator, as well as the operators. And for instance, 2024, we grew 100% from the previous year. 2025, by December, we're projecting to grow 46%. Market size for Malawi from 2024 is $73 million. This year, by the end of December, we're expecting 106. That's 46% growth. That comes with a lot of expectation, a lot of responsibilities, but because of the new act that we incorporated a lot of technology, a lot of changes, we're able to balance the market and manage all the stakeholders so that everyone else's interest is protected. We're also protecting the players, the brands that come in, we're also protecting their profits as well as the way we go to market. And that's what it meant for me. So let's look at Africa, for instance. By 2050, Africa, the population is going to grow by another 78%. That represents an organic growth for any brand out there offering any other service indeed. That also comes with huge responsibility, a lot of work. The only way to tackle all this and balance all this is digitization. So we've seen a lot of benefits, a lot of advantages coming from digitizing, not just the regulatory space, but also for the operators or indeed any other brand or product out there that is going to target the African market. Thank you.
That was amazing. Thanks. I'm sure a lot of us didn't know that about Malawi, but I'm super impressed and thank you. Next on, we go to Mr. Bashir. Mr. Bashir, may I call you Mr. B because it's so much easier. Mr. B, over to you. Is he not here? Okay, so is he on? No. Shall we just pass that question to Zuko quickly? And then when he comes back.
Hello, I can hear you.
Are you here?
Yeah.
Okay, there you are.
Let me piggyback from the first speaker, the lady from Malawi. When we look, judging from your question, I think COVID, internet penetration, broadband expansion on the continent has really opened up our frontier to global operators. So also the love of sport on the continent. And from that, the regulators that have their law already for online gaming license were the front runner. But now I think a majority of the jurisdictions are trying to amend or change their laws. So having said that, one thing I really, in Nigerian perspective, during the COVID, we realized that virtual gaming is really big. Online casino is really big, especially live online casino, because I had the privilege to visit a Construct campus in Armenia, and where we saw live casino with about 40 simultaneous operators with different languages, whatever language, Swahili, Yoruba language, Hausa language, they can activate on the go, and you have an online casino. So the market is really expanding. They're taking advantage of the internet. And it's good that we're having this because the regulation opens the latent regulation opens Africa to disadvantage, because when you don't have the regulation, then the illegal operators will come and operate because you don't have a law to enforce anyway. So, but additionally, we also track Google traffic. So we realized that South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya are where the traffic are going. And they're gradually expanding to other nations on the continent. But largely we discover, because of internet, South Africa, Nigeria, and
Kenya.
And Kenya. In fact, that's it. Operator in South Africa now, I think they call Superbet. They're trying to come back to Nigeria because of the success of Bet King. So there used to be one of their staff was actually the founder of Bet King in Nigeria, and Bet King is really, really doing fine because of the internet. They started in 2018, and they are number 4 in the market now. So that's what I can say at this point in time before we move forward.
Thank you so much for that. Very, very true. Next up, we have Zuko. Would you like to take on that?
No, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you, Lisa. I won't call your full name. Thank you, Lisa. Just to add on what has been alluded to by my previous colleagues, I think firstly, if I were to reflect on the South African context, one, I'll start from the negative side that as South Africa, we have not legalized the interactive online gambling, which has put us on the back foot in terms of you compare with the rest of the world or the rest of the African continent. Then two, with only the online sports betting or the sports betting as the only online gambling form allowed online in South Africa. So, but now when COVID-19, what that Rachel was talking about, hit us, the brick and mortar or the land-based casinos had to close down. They had no operation. Then we lost revenue as the regulators, so is the provincial government or national government in relation to the taxes. Now, if you look at that, and then you look at what COVID-19 did, it forced people, it forced companies, it forced regulators, it forced government to adopt digital space or digital elements. That's why even today we're able to meet virtually because of the COVID-19. Now, if you look at that, what has then happened is that now we have online betting that has been actually, I think, throughout the histories. If you look at the 1600s, you would find that the sports betting have always been the innovative ones. They've come with the new platforms, new events, new forms of operations, and so on and so forth. Hence, there was then an introduction of the wager and record keeping system that they're utilizing. Now, with that background, Annalisa, you would then understand as to this adoption of digitization and digitalization was forced by the what called the COVID-19. Now, the question then is, where are we as South Africa and Africa generally in relation to the legislative framework that is supposed to be setting the scene and the tone for the operators, for the manufacturers, and that must then be protecting public, because remember, our mandate is to license and regulate. In regulating, we must protect the public. Now, Rachel would have touched on the regulatory technology that they've recently invested into. But lastly, on my side as well, is the element of the problem gambling or the illegal gambling that we're fighting against, wherein, because of the online, if you look at it, I think the big chunk of the illegal gambling, you'll find it is online. And now, the stagnant or the lagging in terms of the regulatory framework, and I think for me, it's costing us big time. But if you look at other countries such as your Kenya, such as your Malawi now, that have repealed the old acts that allows them to allow the online gambling operations, which then benefits the fiscus as well. They are benefiting from that. So I think that's what I can pick up from now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So it's more like rehabilitation instead of allowing people to work in illegally. Just bring them into the fore and collect taxes on it. Make it accessible and easier to entry into the market. I mean, a lot of barriers to entry, but as long as there's an open communication between the regulators, then you can enter that market quite easily. On to Mr. Fortune, and then directly after that we can go to Mr. Lahiry.
Thank you, Annalisa. I want to just make a statement from the newspaper article that I read. the gambling industry in Africa stands at a crossroads where the need for innovation collides with the pressing socio-economic realities. That's where we are. So in short, I'm basically saying I've been listening to colleagues and they are spot on. But I'm sure you would have picked up, Annalisa, from all what they said. We are building up a regulatory framework for online. And I can give you a number of countries in Africa. And as Zuko said, Kenya just reviewed their legislation, and Zambia has just done that recently. Rwanda decided to go to the drawing board to draft the whole new policy framework for gambling regulation, which had to deal, among others, with online gambling. So maybe the fair response to your question should be, yes, COVID happened, and I must tell you, it found a situation where the regulators in Africa were very much relaxed, and they didn't see the challenge that COVID could come with, or any disastrous situation could come with. When COVID hit, like Zuko said, in South Africa, as an example, I would just say a great opportunity missed, because there was legislation in place, there was interactive gambling provided for in that legislation. All what South Africa had to do was to pronounce on online gambling as a distinction from interactive gambling and make sure that it puts in place technical standards which could assist to regulate the industry. Opportunity missed. And if you go to Botswana as an example, you said it, Annalisa, very well. Botswana said, okay, there is this problem. We have online gambling and these people, they do as they want. You just said it, Annalisa. They said, bring them in so that we can license them and we will be able to regulate them. And that is why the model that, and we will never get it right in Africa if we insist on having a perfect, there is no perfect piece of legislation, I can tell you, because the speed at which technology moves, and for regulators all over the world, we try to be as proactive as possible. But unfortunately, the speed at which technology advances forces us to always be lagging behind to come up with regulatory mechanisms. I mean, look at what online gambling is doing now in Africa. If you read a newspaper article from Zimbabwe recently, it says a perfect storm of economic pressure and regulatory failure, with salaries failing to cover basic needs. And it goes on to say, Zimbabwe regulatory framework caught off guard by this rapid transition. We then find ourselves in a situation where we have to come up with mechanisms to regulate online gambling with serious challenges for that matter. Most African countries have got, some of them have got beautiful, most of them have got beautiful legislation, but unfortunately when it comes to online gambling and setting and putting the tools together to regulate online gaming, it's a challenge. I'll give you an example. South Africa has got technical standards, which South Africa can pride itself by having those standards for many years. These standards have been tried and tested for many years. I think as in now, we are all clear that those standards have missed the time. They need to be reviewed, and they must be reviewed with speed. At least if you take South Africa as an example, you would find that it's got a relationship with the Bureau of Standards. The Bureau of Standards that can assist in certifying any equipment that would have been tested against the technical standards. I'm talking online now. So if you have a situation like that, you say, that's why I said the opportunity missed. You have at least some tools that you can use. But if you then look all around South Africa, you will find most jurisdictions without technical standards. You find most jurisdictions without a regulatory unit within its Bureau of Standards that understand the industry and can test the equipment and can verify the tests coming from the test laboratories. Now, we have a gap there. And most importantly, Annalisa, before I take much of your time, legislation is just but one of the tools we can use. The most critical element for effective regulation of online gambling or gambling as a whole would be if there are proper structures in place. We find that most countries in Africa have got legislation to regulate gambling, which among others provide for establishment of boards, and you find that those boards are not organizations, it's just a board. And we don't have an organization which can put effect to this legislation. Otherwise, it's a beautiful piece of legislation. All I'm saying is, as much as we amend the legislation, we review it when we go on legislative reform, we review our policy framework on regulation of gambling. We must also understand we need effective resources on the ground to turn the tide. Otherwise, as we have seen over the years, legislation gets amended, it stays there, and organizations which must give effect to it do not take effect for many years. And as a result, we suffer because the regulator's function is to keep the scale. And I always say this because it's important. While we say gambling brings a benefit to our countries in the form of economic growth, in the form of collection of revenue, in the form of attraction of tourism, and in the old sense as it used to be as a form of leisure. There are costs associated with it. And the main cost that we have, well, as I read the article from Zimbabwe, is that our people are going to suffer. Addiction to gambling is problem number one. But with online Annalisa, what we have seen happening, we've got risks of security when it comes to our countries. Our countries are not secured. We're talking about illicit flows of money, which money can be used for terrorism, which money could even get our countries grey-listed, which money could be element of fraud, which monies could deplete the economic growth potential of our countries. So that's a new problem that is growing much, much faster than addiction to gambling and racing pound for pound with responsible gaming. So we have a bigger problem than we had before. So there is an urgent need to appreciate that even if we do legislative reform, we should put in place adequate structures and other unnecessary tools to give effect to those pieces of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm hearing more about what I'm getting from this is that we may have the legislation, but if we don't have the skills and the people and the technology to drive this, we will end up having a bigger beast to actually manage. So you're absolutely correct there. And I've in some of the regulators' defense, I actually see a lot of job vacancies now for IT and technical recruitments, as opposed to your normal inspectors and stuff. They must come with that background to manage and audit the type of business that we find ourselves in. So very much true, 100%. And yes, we need to have skills mandated at these. I think you need to have cleverer people than the people that are operating at the regulators, so that we can fine-tune the processes. When I say clever, I mean cleverer than the operators, not cleverer as in standards. Sorry, let's just be specific. Mr. Lahiry, over to you.
Good. I think the panelists covered it very well, and starting with Rachel, that how pandemic changed it all, and sitting in 2025, the effect of pandemic is still seen, right? And as Bashir pointed out, that it accelerated, the adoption of mobile gaming or internet gaming or whatever you may call iGaming or e-gaming. So we now have a situation where, as per World Lottery Association statistics, which I just received, the compendium, 100% growth in Africa, okay, in terms of the mobile gaming, So yes, it's turning out to be big, and we were not prepared for this animal, okay? So we need to cage it. We need to make sure that, it's good. It's good in a way that, definitely the adoption is widespread. and it's generating a lot of revenue, generating a lot of money for good causes. Those things are good, but then responsible gaming, right? But what I would say is it's still much easier technically, operationally to monitor and manage, the online gaming part. It's very, very difficult when it comes to the land-based, when it comes to the street level. Okay, though I had been to 25 different countries in Africa, and the first thing I do is visit a casino and buy a ticket on the street. Okay, and my experience is that there's a huge, huge amount of illegal, gambling, and also, I mean, of course, you are straight away asked either whether you want a ticket out of the machine or you want a ticket out of a chit. Okay, so it's a situation where we need to see not only the online part but also the land-based part. We have to have holistic solution. One shoe doesn't fit all. So definitely the big jurisdictions can have a solution. They can adopt very easily. Or whereas smaller countries, smaller jurisdictions, may face it really challenging. But at the same time, that it doesn't stop us from having a common framework, common minimum framework, okay, which and Fortune really pointed out the gravity of the problem, that is actually around the corner in terms of money laundering, terror financing, and all those kind of stuff. So yes, we as a technical person, I say solutions exist for everything, but it's a game of where the anti-socials are always trying to be ahead. They also have access to technology. Okay, with the AI, with the machine learning, things are going to be more and more challenging. So yes, it's a 2025. It's a nice place to be. It's a really good challenge that I love addressing. Yeah, so that's from my side.
Thank you. Thank you for that. By the way, just on a point of note on Botswana, when I went to Botswana and I saw what they were doing, I thought I actually landed in Wakanda. So when I met the CEO of the company, I said, "Oh, I'm not calling Botswana anymore. I'm calling it Wakanda because the speed to which you rolled out and the speed to which you've done things and the structures and everything, I'm so impressed." So yes, that is an exemplary model of a country that is, small but very effective. And we cannot take that away from them. It's something we should, which they need their credit for. Also, the type of, communication and stuff that they use out there and they get their message across. That's something that is really, really great. Over to the next question now, and I don't think we're going to reach the 5-question mark. So I'm going to try and put these questions together so we can get out as much as we can. And as much information as we can. So do you think that there is a discernible shift towards harmonization, regulatory harmonization across Africa? And what are the institutional frameworks that are driving this and bilateral mechanisms that are facilitating this cross-border alignment and communication? I know we have a lot in place and a lot of communication around this. Also, your opinions, also what you think we could do to make things better, if we're not, and where we see ourselves mobilizing this the most. Over to you, Mr. Bashir, because I know that you are actively involved in this and you can start the process and then we can move on.
Thank you very much. I'll go back to Mr. Fortune's statement about technical standard. And if I hear him correctly, he said even in South Africa, some provinces do not even have technical standards. And I was shocked when I heard that, because my first visit outside of Nigeria when I took over was South Africa. I went to Gauteng, I went to Western Cape. And immediately I saw the technical standard, as old as it was better than what we had in Nigeria. And I was ready immediately to adopt it. Because one thing that is key, we can never harmonize without collaboration. we have to collaborate first before we can harmonize. We need to know each other. We need to know what we have, and we need to know where we are at which stage. We all have our comparative advantages. So when we collaborate, then it will be easier to harmonize whatever is good in your environment. I'll adopt it. Whatever that is good in my environment, you adopt it, and it becomes a continental standard. And it is easier for the operator. It is easier for enforcement on the side of regulator, because we almost like a basic fundamental standard. Yes, there could be some differences, because in some countries on the continent, they have a unitary system of government. In some countries, they have a federal system of government. So there'll be some minor differences or some differences, but at least there'll be a fundamental standard that everybody can adopt. And that makes life easier to the operator, to the regulators, and to all stakeholders, including suppliers, payment companies, and banks. So I think our focus should be on harmonization. Harmonization is the destination, but collaboration is the foundation. And if we do that, it will be easier for us to move forward at a faster pace.
That was beautiful. Also, with regard to institutional frameworks, and I know that you're part of a body now that's harmonizing, that's trying to mobilize this collaboration and harmonization. If we can just touch on that briefly before I move on, so that we don't have to revisit.
Do you mean in Nigeria?
No, I mean in Africa. What you're doing in Africa. The fact that you're trying to move us all together and bring us together, and what you're trying to achieve.
The Botswana incident, when I met with the Eastern Cape CEO, who happens to be the president of Graph. So I spoke with him. Somebody had raised an issue that we should create another regulatory forum. Say, if there is Graph, why can't we just amplify Graph, resuscitate Graph? And because of that, we have been trying to bring people together at different conferences. When I'm going to International IAGRA conference, SBC, I try to include some African regulators that I know, so we can carry each other along. And for example, now IAGRA, in the past 5 years, we've been lucky now that Africa is represented, and at least we need 3 trustees on IAGRA board right now. So I'm currently one. So I think we're looking for additional 2 or 3. And because of that, I put it on the Graph chat group that people should submit their profile so we can nominate and endorse them. So we're doing that. And although it's not close, but we're doing that right now. So I believe in regional collaboration. So I'm from West Africa. I'm already on the board. So somebody from the East, South, or North should be on the trustee, so that we can all have all-encompassing African representation, and that will really help. And that goes back to what we mentioned yesterday, that some big brother have to take the responsibility. Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa has to take the responsibility so other can follow. So when we have that, if you look at the global politics, what just happened in China, Russia, and whatever. So those big economies come together and the other follows. When you look at, I'm very happy that South Africa is part of the BRICS. So things like that we should emulate on our own sectorial level, so that we can move forward, and then this harmonization we're looking for can be earlier than later.
The beauty of you being part of it is that you're so accessible to the people, and that's something that we must commend you on. I mean, you're one of the people that if someone sends you a LinkedIn message or tries to reach out via email or calls you, you take the call. So, I mean, there is no better person than I believe right now sitting mobilizing this, because just the person that you are, we know it's going to be successful.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so next we'll move to Ms. Rachel, if you can give us your input.
Thank you very much. True indeed, harmonization is very important because one will work coherently and will work efficiently. There will be no need for member states to reinvent the wheel when the standards and guidelines are already there. that, for instance, Graph has pioneered. And I'm happy to say Graph is taking the steps to make sure that Africa works together. It doesn't come cheap. When we look at the demographics, in terms of internet penetration for most of the African countries, the demographics, the GDP, not very far from each other. But as regulators, member states have to be ready and prepared to pump in a lot of money. When we, in that graph meetings, graph board meetings, what comes up is, oh, so-and-so has not paid. We need to pay up our membership subscription, because to harmonize, to work as one block is not easy. Borrowing on the economic side, we're looking at there's COMESA, there's SADC, and then there's ECOWAS, and all these member states, it becomes complicated. And a spaghetti ball of policies and guidelines. So on our side, it's going to be easy. Graph is already there, pioneering the same. There's a Gaming Lab International. GLI already has got the standards. We just have to borrow from them. We look at the EU. The EU also got a central monitoring system championed by the EU for all the member states when it comes to our sector, the gaming and lottery side. We borrow from that. But as I've said, it's not cheap. It means a lot of connectivity, a lot of bandwidth, ISPs that have to connect to all these member states. Members have to be willing to contribute if we are to harmonize, if we are to come up with one greater framework, standards that are already there, work with GLI. I've seen a comment on the chat, I think from a testing lab CEO. They're saying, no, what you need is uniform regulation. It came from the comments on the people, on the participants, on the viewers, as well as uniform regulation, and the requirements have to be very clear for everyone else. So yes, that's very possible, and we can do it, but members have to be willing to come in to invest in that sector, and that requires a lot of money. Thank you.
Unfortunately, it's very difficult when you're laying foundations like this, but I hope we can get there. Fortune, do you want to step in?
Thank you so much, Annalisa. Let me just piggyback on what Bashir was saying. I'm going to start with the technical standard. Maybe let me clarify. Bashir, what I was saying is South Africa has got national standards. They've got national standards, technical standards. So every province in the country use those technical standards. What I meant, and which is your point, I would not understand why, if I'm sure Botswana or Namibia would not mind if I use them as an example. Why, if Botswana or Namibia would like to test software, they should struggle by taking time to develop technical standards, which may not be done or completed at least in a period of, say, more than 24 months. I engaged with one Bureau of Standards, and they told me that it can take well over 3 years if they have to go through the whole process of developing their own technical standard. Good point you are making there. Do not reinvent the wheel. These, for all intents and purposes, are international standards. What we should be doing as different jurisdictions is to work with them, and if we do not like one or two of the clauses in the standard, review them to meet the peculiarities of our situation in our jurisdiction. If there's something that we are doing slightly different from other jurisdictions, probably because of what our legislation prescribes for us to do, there's no need. These are international standards. Right now, we have 2 test laboratories. We have BMM and we have GLI. Which are at least the prominent ones that I know, and apologies for any test laboratory that operates in Africa that I'm not recognizing. But the standards are there. The test laboratories, Annalisa, what they have to do is just to test whatever software you bring according to those technicals. If it's a wagering system that you want, if it's a central electronic monitoring system, they can test according to those standards. Now, importantly, if we have to work together, do not reinvent the wheel. What I've discovered recently, Annalisa, is that a Bureau of Standards in your jurisdiction, be it in Malawi or in Zambia, may adopt the international technical standards. They may adopt them, bring them. It's a much shorter process to introduce those techniques, because the longer we take to have the international standards recognized and applied in your jurisdiction, the bigger the problem and the faster the problem grows. So it's not necessary to go and spend 3 years to develop technical standards. One other issue, and I'm also picking it up from the earlier discussions, Mr. Bashir, and you are right. I don't understand why Africa should struggle to have uniform rules, to have uniform standards, because our situation is almost the same. We don't have really serious points of difference as compared to if one has to talk about Singapore compared to South Africa, if I can give you an example, or Macau, China as compared to South Africa, or compared to Malawi or Zambia. We do not have serious points of difference. I'll show you, I'll demonstrate to you. Most of the manufacturers of gaming equipment, Annalisa, I don't want to mention them by name, but they operate in Africa. And you know what they do? And they will tell you straight in your face, we don't have to test this equipment because it was tested in South Africa in terms of this technical standard. And that machine is on the gambling floor. That software is in the gaming, is in the gambling system. So whether we like it or not, this thing is happening. The only thing what we have to do is to bring it together with common understanding. There's no need, Annalisa, for us to probe an individual and follow that person and get that person probed again in Uganda and get probed again in Swaziland on simple requirements that we all know. I had the luck of serving in the subcommittee of the International Association of Regulators. And my assignment was to develop a multi-jurisdictional probity investigation form. That form talks to simple things. What is your name? What's your address? These things we all need. You have a tax clearance, the requirement is the same. Have you been arrested before? Does that crime resonate anywhere, and how with dishonesty? Those things are there. The question is, why don't we just agree that, so that if I have to move from, say, Malawi to Nigeria, I know that Mr. Bashir is going to look at me as Malawi would look at me. What changes? If there's anything additional, let it be that I'm asking, or Nigeria will only ask for that bit that is additional. Then comes, Mr. Bashir, the point that you were driving, and also Rachel, you also talked to that point as well. Why do we seem like we are fighting? We have no reason to fight. If I see with appreciation what most jurisdictions are doing lately, they enter into memoranda of understanding. That's a beautiful thing, because then you can reach out to each other. And why don't, if we can have memoranda of understanding among ourselves, why can't we have a structure that we can work with together, so that we then do what the industry expects of us, to have, at least to the extent reasonable, and to the extent that it doesn't cause problems with our political considerations from one country to another, we then have something that we agree to that's uniform, and the industry then doesn't get frustrated. The industry gets frustrated because I'll ask for a wheel of size 14 in Malawi, and then I go to Namibia and they say, but you are one size short, we want size 13. But I mean, they're all tires. So I'm trying to get to the point that even if there can be distinctions, they cannot be fundamental to deny us the opportunity to regulate this industry effectively and efficiently as we are required by our diverse pieces of legislation.
Can I come in quickly, please?
So in conclusion, I'm just saying, be it graph or what, but I would support the version that goes with, we can work together, and some jurisdictions, some markets must take a lead. Because if we're going to go around like this every now and then, I've been with Graph, and I know we've been discussing these things for many years. How many years now? I think it's about 20 years down the line. We haven't moved. So I think somebody has to take the lead, and the rest will have to follow. Otherwise, we are not going to move. Thank you.
Please, can I buttress Mr. Fortune's point just quickly? Just quickly. What he has said is majorly what I've been doing for the past 5 years, and it has really worked in my jurisdiction. One, In South Africa, we have MOU with Gauteng. In Botswana, we have one. We have in Malta. We have with UK Gambling Commission right now. So if an operator comes now and you are from those jurisdictions, what we usually do, we call that jurisdiction after you submit your application, and we request for a letter or certificate of good standing. And when you have that, you can get your license within 7 days. So we don't have to go through background check, this and that, because most of the operators, either you like it or not, they're international. The investors are international. So the platform providers are international. So if you want to waste your time, then you go through verification, validation. Why you can get from your sister or your brother regulator across the border. So that's what we have been doing on that level. So again, to reiterate, Graph needs to move forward, and there has to be big brothers that will take the lead.
Just on that point, before you start, Zuko, on that point, it's something that we've been discussing for a long time on that multi-jurisdictional license in Africa, because a barrier to entry from a B2B side is the time it takes to actually become operational in Africa. I may want to become legal because I have 16 websites all over South Africa, but the time it's going to take me to actually mobilize that is money that I've lost. But if this happens and rehabilitation is something that we're looking at, or major entrance, that immediately every country is now going to benefit from one license that is issued within a jurisdiction. For example, if it's South Africa, if it's a South African operator, everybody benefits. We just send the information and cross-pollinate. And that's where technology will also play a role, because it could just be a click of a button, really, at the end of the day, if everyone's connected. Over to you, Zuko.
Thank you, Annalisa. Very interesting points made by colleagues here. And I think I want to start from the point that Fortune made about our awareness of not what to call it, if we are to respect the political legislative framework in that particular country. And I believe it talks to what I would term as our awareness that we have Africa as a continent, but we have regions like Rachel was saying, that you have ECOWAS, you would have your SADC, you would have your all other regions as well. And then you have the AU at the top. You would find that there are trade agreements or trade treaties that have been entered into by the countries in Africa. But as Bashir was saying, that we're not utilizing that to our benefit as a subsector of the economic cluster. That's another point that I think we need to look into that. But also, I think the other element that is important for us is that whilst we are for harmonization, ours is not to say we are going to offend, countries' sovereignty, countries' cultures, countries' beliefs, countries' political outlook and setup. And I think also you'll find that in other countries in Africa, there's an element of instability politically. And now that then imposes a threat in terms of how the regulators are structured and are operational. You would have heard what Fortune was saying earlier on. You'll find that in terms of the law, the organization exists, but in terms of functional and operational and governance-wise, the organization that does not exist. So I think that is key and very much important. But you would have asked a question of, do we have any institutional frameworks that we have in place as in Africa that would lead us toward harmonizing our regulatory framework as Africa? You would understand that, as Rachel would have mentioned, we have GRAPH. Fortunately, Bashir would have mentioned that it would have been someone who wanted to form another association of gambling regulators whilst we have GRAPH, and then he has tried to diffuse that. But recently there was an organization, in fact, I know it's moving forward to join African, standards organization, all the bureaus in Africa, to have one as an Africa. So I think that's a very much key and very progressive work that has been done in Africa. But I think also, Madam Rachel, maybe we must look at as GRAPH member states to say, Whilst we have board of trustees, we need to have a layer below that we will term as a working group or a functional group element that then seek to operationalize the decisions that are taken in our conferences. Because the problem currently is that we go to these conferences, we have beautiful speeches, we have beautiful conversations, but we leave these conversations in the conference room, and then we don't see these implemented, or we see just 2 or 20% of that. But we come back to conferences, we talk about the same issue again over and over, like Fortune was saying, that's been in discussion for over 20 years. Now, the other element that I wanted to bring forth as well is an issue that as regulators, we are entities and institutions of government. Now, if we do not have government that is keen and active, like for example, I would have been in ICE last year. I saw Mexico, I saw Peru, I saw Brazil, government officials attending the ICE conference and actually participating in discussions. So now you would have seen, Annalisa would have said on my LinkedIn profile, a framework that I'm trying to conceptualize. I call it a PROG framework. It's public or patrons, it's regulators, it is your operators, and then government. Now, government must create policies that set the scene and the tone for regulators to be able to effectively and efficiently regulate. But government must then be able to understand the dynamics. Because remember, government at the end of the day is the beneficial in terms of the people of the country are protected through regulation. Secondly, government also benefit through the revenue generated or collected by the regulators. But now, if we have a problem, an economic problem, wherein there's more money needed so that people can build house or homes and so on and so forth, but we do not create an environment that is conducive for the industry to thrive, but obviously that thriving must be ethical and responsible. Hence, for example, as Eastern Cape currently, we are exploring, the digital technologies to ensure that there's responsible gambling managed, illegal gambling, we can detect that. But for me, Annalisa, in preparation for this webinar, I was looking at saying, despite that we have different backgrounds and history, you would find that we have Franco and Anglo, countries in Africa, but that should not then deter us in harmonizing. But in harmonizing, it doesn't mean that we must standardize everything. But I believe that we can agree as African countries. There's something that I put again that I call. I use the Bible. I'm sorry to those that are not Christians, but I use the Bible that says the 7 commandments of a reimagined gambling regulatory framework. Now, what are these 7 commandments, Annalisa, I'm talking about? At the top of my pyramid as integrity first. That talks to the ethical conduct and responsible conduct by the operators. And then you will talk to, we need to protect the vulnerable, the underage, the problem gamblers, and so on and so forth. And these things are covered in terms of our regulatory framework in South Africa. But it's just that we may be lacking in terms of maybe the policy that then expand that information from the regulatory framework. We then talk to, because we're saying now, since COVID-19, there was a digital adoption. Now, when you talk of digital adoption, it means that there's an element of data privacy, there's an element of cybersecurity. So then we must have data and system security. We must then go to the fairness and accountability. The product that Annalisa is offering to the public has got to be fair. And then Annalisa must be held accountable for that. That is, maybe it can be done through our licensing conditions of license. We then talk to what I've then termed as the regulatory trust and transparency. Now, what do I mean about the regulatory trust and transparency? It means that the public, when they look at us, when they see us, they must trust us because through the work that we do it transparently. We also involve them in the work that we do. Also, Fortune would have spoken about the social economic issues, whether tourism, whether employment, whether criminal activities, and so on. So we ought to have a sustainable and revenue and social impact. There's got to be a balance on that one. And lastly, because we are saying that we are in the world that is ever evolving because of technology, now we must have a framework that is adaptable to emerging threats. What are these emerging threats? You would have said, Bashir, and unfortunately, I think Rachel as well, that, whilst we must be excited and appreciate the new technologies, but we must be alive to the realities that there will be, I think, no, it was Sujit, there would be those elements of criminal elements that using your AI or your IoT and so on and so forth. But lastly, from my side, colleagues, is that I can tell you what Nigeria is doing in South Africa, by the way, is done. But I think maybe the issue or the problem would be that there's no coordination. And I think it's something that we need to improve on. Because if you talk to Mpumalanga, for example, I know they've entered into MOU with, I think it's Malta and the UK Commission. We are in the process as well. I think we've got 2 or 3 with other countries in Europe, and we're doing that in Africa as well. So for us, as much as that there are problems, but I think the problem we've got solutions. It's just a matter of that we're not talking to each other, like Fortune was saying. So perhaps through you, program director, again, is to say now within Africa, if we can have 2 or 3 African countries agreeing and moving, maybe others will start to realize and move and say we want to join in. And I can tell you it's possible. Thank you so much.
Okay, so just before we go to you, Mr. Lahiry, and I know you're going to probably close up with us on the technological discussion, I just want to put this in perspective for us from what I'm hearing. I'm hearing policy drives your legislation. Legislation, effective policy from government will drive your legislation. Your effective legislation will drive your regulations. That will then drive your rules within your country. And all of that together will then drive your processes with the right resources and right technology, people, etc., to manage this industry and bring it to the fore. And in terms of standardization, we can't really have standardization in South Africa if we don't have some sort of a big brother in South Africa holding all the provinces together. And I say that with much love because I love my country and I love what we're doing here. But if we just can collaborate with each other in South Africa, we can also create harmonization. I mean, like we could have everyone consulting with Malta instead of single boards, taking the initiative and everyone following suit. So it's the same principle, and I suppose that principle will extend to countries which have multi states or multi provinces, etc. But if we can keep that in mind, that everything is built on policy. If government gives us the right directive, we can protect player interests. We know we've defined it. We can do all of that stuff. Moving on to Sujit, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I must say that rest of the world has to learn a lot from Africa, and not Africa has to learn a lot from rest of the world. Okay, so this panel is proven. I mean, the kind of the depth of their information and everything is phenomenal. Okay, and the leadership is there. So if Bashir can actually bring in 26 different states into one forum, definitely, graph can be revived. Graph can be, of course, Rochelle brought in one very important point, that the cost. Okay. Should we all be meeting at a nice place, and how frequently? Of course, a good thing is that now more and more events are taking place in Africa. Okay, so that's giving more and more opportunity to meet and discuss. But at the same time, definitely, why can't we have, like today, we are having this webinar, more and more of them, right? So, in order to balance out cost, you definitely, technology can help quite a lot there, in terms of, again, trying to figure out what should be the common, basic, minimum standard, right? That actually everybody should subscribe to, and then, adding the, political flavor, religious flavor, or everything else on top of that. So, that is something which is very much possible at very small cost. Okay, and that definitely technology can play a very big role there. So we are not talking about technology only in terms of playing the games or managing the games or regulating the games, but also making sure that the platform is there, it's created, it's recreated, and it's re-energized. So yes, definitely the focus will be a lot in terms of what technology I can go on and on in terms of what technology can do in the regulatory space. But I believe even enabling this regulatory discussion, so much of knowledge which is there, why can't we create a kind of a database where the repository, which can be accessed by members, and the thought process is being shared. So yes, definitely the simple things like Bashir talked about, creating a WhatsApp group, I mean, moving it to Slack or moving it to, much more collaborative methods definitely are very much possible, very cost effectively. Yeah, so those are my thoughts. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I just want to put this thought out there. If we could even standardize every regulator's websites to have necessary document repositories so that it becomes accessible, example, applications and frameworks, regulations and rules. Some regulators have it done beautifully, and some you have trouble finding that information. But on a real micro level, the smallest level, if this information can be shared across and we have some sort of standardization on how we display this, that would also be a big win in Africa right now, because we'll be able to access the information to understand what's happening within the country. And it's little things like this that can build the base for something bigger. And I just want to ask everyone their closing thoughts, but just if you could just point in the direction of where you see this going, and how long do you think it will take us to make some great changes, and just your thoughts on everything else. Let's start with you, Rachel, and then we can move on.
Thank you very much. My final thoughts, there's huge potential in Africa for everyone, the operators, governments, the markets. As I said earlier on, Africa by 2050, the population would have doubled. Internet penetration for the region is 66%, with some like Malawi, 40, Zambia in that region. So when you look at Europe, you take population growth for Europe declining, older people in there growing 0.17% year on year. Africa 2.34% growth. That should give anyone organic growth of on average 4% year on year. Hence, we're seeing the big brands coming into Africa, and they want to do a footprint, because it also becomes efficient for the big brand if they are available in most of the African countries. So today, you look at Betway, for instance, they're in South Africa. They're listed on the New York Stock Exchange in Tanzania. They're also in Malawi, in Botswana, and they're increasing their footprint. Other big brands should fall as well into the Africa region, because that's where growth is going to come in the next 10 years. That also puts an expectation on the regulator. How do we then welcome these brands into the market? Our policies, our working standards, the way we deliver, the way we go to the market, enticing enough to entice these big brands to come into the market, to invest in the region. Where else do they go? We want Africa to grow. And if we standardize, as everyone else is saying, Graph comes in with those standardized guidelines and policies, it will be easier for a big brand like Betway to come into the market, 888, which is listed on London Stock Exchange, to come into the market and invest in more of the African countries, giving back to the people, creating employment, also contributing to GDP growth of those countries. Then lastly, as regulators, then that brings us a huge responsibility on the policies, guidelines that were there, the standards that we're working with, and then to make sure that the operators, they are also we're balancing the interests of the stakeholders. The operators are making profits, we're protecting the people as a regulator, and the market is thriving for sustainable growth, because without the customers, there's not going to be a market. Graph comes in with standardized policies that will be very easy, super easy for everyone else to come into, or invite them as a block, say, come invest in Africa. And we should see the industry thriving, creating more jobs for the youth, giving back to the people, and giving more money into the government pot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. You are an inspiration. I have to tell you, what a powerhouse. Before we leave, I am so proud to be a woman when I listen to you because you are phenomenal. Nothing short of dynamite. And I think that you've given everyone something to think about, and you've impressed the socks out of us today. I mean, like, really, I'm wow.
Likewise, Rush, inspired by your energy, your confidence, and your knowledge of the industry and everything else. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rachel, I'm Annalisa. Rashi is, but we look alike. I know that we do. But nice.
Oh,
I don't mind being called Rashi. She's beautiful. But I'm very happy to meet you.
Wine.
No,
Thank
no, we'll
you.
have it together. It's okay. It's okay. But it's not an issue. I just wanted to tell you. It's me. So you're going to see me soon in Africa because I'm at all the events.
Sorry, Annalisa. So sorry, Annalisa, about that.
Okay. Over to you, Mr. B. Where are you?
I'm here.
May we have your closing thoughts?
I think I really want to appreciate people that took their time for the interest of the industry and the continent. And, I'm open, I'm ready for any collaboration to move the industry forward, whichever we can get. Because if we don't do it, the illegal operators are they're having the best time of their life, and it's in their best interest for us not to cooperate. And I will borrow from Rachel. I think I just met her today. She seems to be a very practical person, because in Nigeria or somewhere else, they say lack of money is the root of all evil, not the not money. So, but there are so many ways we can, once we are together, the big brothers on the continent, there are so many ways we can do financial engineering to push things forward. Use our influence, our offices to do financial engineering. I know it's difficult for some of us to get approval from our executives or from our ministers and stuff like that. But there's always a way. And I believe between now and next year, we should be, if not where we want to be, we should be halfway. And I'll continue to be in touch with everybody on this platform.
When you,
Everyone.
sorry, Bashir, I'm sorry for interjecting. I just want to reiterate that you are definitely the kind brethren, because you're always hospitable and helping everyone around you in Africa. So, thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Over to you, Zuko. Shall we do Zuko before we go to Fortune?
Thank you. Yeah, I think let me come first because Fortune is my senior, so it would be it has been of me to speak before him. I think for me, while I agree fully that the future is iGaming, but I want to disagree a little bit that for me, I think the hybrid model is going to be the future, or is a future for Africa. But I think what's going to happen, the brick and mortar model is going to downsize a bit, but still be effective, because I think we've got a diverse pool of consumers that still prefer that leisure that Fortune was referring to. So for me, that one, but definitely technology is going to drive us as it continues to drive us. Technology is going to. Okay, it seems like there was a problem. As I was saying, but definitely technology is going to be driving us. Your IoTs, your big data analytics, your AI and so on. But obviously that has got to be used responsibly. For me, I think I agree with Sujit to say the world is going to and must learn from Africa. So the last word for me would be that we must be ethical. We must operate compliant-wise. We must also be responsible. As regulators or as operators, the responsibility to protect the public is not the regulators only. Because why I'm saying this, in my framework, the PROG framework, I say if you don't protect your consumers, therefore it means that the consumption of your product or your offering will not enjoy sustainability. So it is in your best interest as operators to ensure that you operate ethically and responsibly. So thank you to Skilrock Technologies and the audience for affording us this conversation, because I can tell you from today, everyone else will understand what is it Africa that is doing, and then what are then the elements, or we may find that there will be someone who's then say, I can propose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as a solution to the problems, but can I maybe request you to help me in such and such and such? So thank you so much, Annalisa, for being so live. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Zuko. And I'm always inspired by you. I'm watching your space. Fortune, your thoughts?
Yes, Annalisa, I'm going to pick a point from the structure that you presented earlier, and I want to ring-fence the problem that I see from where I'm sitting. At least over a period of, say, 6 months, I've read about 7 pieces of legislation of different African states. I've assessed what stops them from being what they're supposed to be. And I found this problem, and I would like us to go back home, having this on the top of the list of our things to do, to see if this cannot assist us in moving forward. And I will give an indication of what I see in the future. Annalisa, most of the pieces of legislation that I read, there is a minister responsible for gambling. Now, there is a frustration sometimes in other jurisdictions where you find that gambling regulation broadly, which includes online gambling, is divided into components. It's broken down. We found one arm sits with the Ministry of Finance because there are taxes to be collected. They cannot be arms now and say pillars now. One pillar is with the Ministry of Finance, another pillar is with the Ministry of Tourism, and the third pillar is with the Ministry of Trade and Industry. You've got a problem. So let's go back home and look at this. And once you see this, you must know that's where you have to start getting things organized. I've seen Lesotho recently trying to put them all together because they also have that situation. I can see Swaziland has got the same problem. So they should look at that. And these are just examples from the reading of the legislation of those different jurisdictions. Let me go to the second leg of the problem. The second leg of this problem, which has got 3 pillars, is that you then find, and with respect to the chairpersons of the board, please, I'm just saying this because I have to make an input here, that you find that the Act says the board should advise the minister. Now, what does it mean? It means after all discussions have taken off at the board meeting and we realize that there's too much of gambling and there's not enough regulation of online, the chairperson of the board must go to the minister and sit in that office until the minister understands that these are socio-economic problems which are going to be while running throughout the country. Let's deal with them. Because if you do not have those sessions with your relevant minister, you're going to come back and complain about the political will. When you have a responsibility in terms of your act to go and advise the minister may not know everything about gambling. He's got too many things to do. It is for you as the regulator to make time to sit with it. And I know they are not readily available, but to push to engage with the minister so that the minister says, oh, now I see where the problem is. Then you have your political will. Once you've got the political will, you've got a policy framework coming. And I would advise most jurisdictions to go back and look for the document that is called the policy framework for gambling regulation in my country. In most countries, you don't find that. And which is a problem because you are going to keep on running with amendment of legislation randomly and every time you meet a situation where you don't have a clearly framed position of departure. So if you have a policy framework, it will guide you on what to improve in your legislation to ensure that there is effective and efficient regulation. We are all here about protecting the panther. We are all here about making sure that the industry is sustainable. We are all here to make sure that there are socio-economic benefits coming from regulating this. Most jurisdictions issue licenses and they issue licenses without taking care of the number of employment opportunities to be created. How many schools and old age homes are going to be built out of that? How much can we contribute to health? Those elements are always lacking, are mainly lacking from the RFA, which is a request for applications. So do advise number last. Do not grant a license until such time you have sat down analyze your the socio-economic position of your country, understand the priorities of your country, draw them down into a request for applications, which will be a guiding document, and trying to standardize what these people that you want to license are going to do after licensing. Then we can go later and deal with regulatory compliance and gather our tools. Last, I found the central electronic monitoring system. It may have been worded differently, but it is there in some pieces of legislation. All what we have said about possibility of standardization, or all what we have said as a great opportunity of harmonization, which stands at the top of my list, can be done. And I agree with you, Sujit. We can have a clearly defined system which can deal with all the elements that Zuko was talking about, the Christian elements that we're talking about. They can all be built into the system for as long as we make sure that the data that is contained or moving in the system is protected. And lastly, illegal gambling, we all know them. We all know them. There's no jurisdiction that doesn't know an illegal operator, especially online in your jurisdiction. If we can work together, we will do the same thing that I suggested with the multi-jurisdictional form. We will know who he is, where he is, what is he doing, and we will then find a better solution to deal with illegal gambling. On that note, I wish Africa the best, and I believe this is achievable. Mr. Bashir, I'm going to throw this at your desk. I think you can do this, and I can only just say all of the best, and thanks to my fellow panelists. Thank you, Annalisa.
Thank you.
Well, sorry, Bashir, you're on.
No, I just said thank you to Fortune. That's all.
Oh, okay. No, you came into the fore, so I thought maybe you wanted to say something as well. I just wanted to say you can't run away, Fortune, with all that information and all that knowledge. You've got to support this entire process through right to the end. Like you said, you crossed onto the other side and you burnt your fingers and you came back. So stay, stay where you are and help us all build Africa. I think everyone is, in my opinion, before I move to Sujit's closing statement, everyone that lives in Africa is passionate about its people and is passionate about its countries and is passionate about where we're going. We are a force, and often people underestimate the power of Africans. But the one thing we have is the love for people, the love for culture, the way we are. We're a people. We're not segregated. And I think if we come together and we just really focus on that, no matter who we are, what color, what creed, whatever, we can make this work. Because unity is something we've all learned. It's part of our history. We've learned how to come together and forge ahead when times are dark. So that's just what I want to say. And then over to you, Sujit, for your
Well,
closing remarks.
of course, it was a really wonderful panel and eminent people, coming into this forum. Of course, this calls for a sequel. Okay, so it calls for we thought we will cover 5 questions, and we just could cover 2. So definitely I'll work with Rashid, so make sure that we have some follow-up sessions, right? Because at the end, definitely, we discussed the topic and, so many knowledgeable people, Fortune, again, brought up the practicalities of those situations. Zuko talked about, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the things, that actually need to be there. And Bashir, of course, has actually demonstrated that he can do things, right. And Rachel again, wonderfully put into her perspective, again, which are very, very live and very, very practical. So, I believe, today we couldn't cover all, but at the same time, definitely, we believe there is a lot to collaborate on, and definitely this show must go on. We must have, webinar number 2, number 3 to be followed, and we then definitely will have actionables. Okay, so the common minimum, the framework that we talk about at least not in a very formal way, but in a very informal way, we can definitely list them down. So that would be pretty good. And from technology perspective, I must say that technology is nothing but its implementation of the ideas. As long as you can define the use cases, as long as you can define that this is what needs to be done, that this needs to be done in this way, a technology solution can be found. I can assure you that, right? So, so yes, on that note, I would say whatever we discussed today, everything was relevant, everything is practical, everything can be done. And it's coming from the heart of all of you who are so knowledgeable. And Annalisa, you actually moderated it so well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your kind words. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar. Whoever's participated, given us your thoughts, your lovely wishes. Thank you for all the support, and make sure to tune in again to the next session. Also reach out to all of us if you have something valuable to say, play a role. No voice is too soft. We want to hear it. Okay, thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
You want to say goodbye, everyone? Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank
Thank you so
you.
much. Bye-bye.